Thanks very much, Karen.
Can you see the
So
present? Okay,
yes, yeah,
okay.
I can see the presentation. Okay, so if we move on to the next slide, I'm going to kick off with telling you a bit about our role at the Commission and how we work before handing over to Karen. So um, the role of the Scottish Land Commission, we are a public body. We were established on the 1st of April 2017, so we've got our birthday coming up. And we were established by the Land Reform Scotland Act 2016. We are governed by 5 land commissioners and 1 tenant farming commissioner who are appointed by ministers, and we currently have 17 members of staff working across good practice, policy and research, and our communications and corporate services teams. And our role at the Commission really is to work on evidence-led policy advice to government. And so we do that by stimulating fresh thinking, supporting change in practice, and making recommendations to Scottish ministers where appropriate for legislative and policy change. So we actively support alignment of practice with the principles of the Land Rights and Responsibility Statement, which really provides a foundation for our work at the Commission, particularly our good practice work. Next slide, please. So the Land Rights and Responsibility Statement I've just mentioned is kind of a foundational document for us. So the statement adopts a human rights approach to land rights and responsibilities and really signals a determination to lead the way in ensuring that Scotland's land, whether that's urban or rural, contributes to inclusive and sustainable economic growth and to social justice. So the statement sets out a vision for Scotland's land and how it's used, and it is supported by 7 key principles. The first principle of the statement sets out that the overall framework of land rights, responsibilities and public policies should promote, fulfil and respect relevant human rights in relation to land, contribute to public interest and well-being, and balance public and private interests. The framework should support sustainable economic development, protect and enhance the environment, help achieve social justice and build a fairer society. And really, we all have a responsibility to deliver the outcomes of the Land Rights and Responsibility Statement and the other principles that it sets out, which are around meaningful community engagement, and we'll hear more about that in a little while. Transparency of ownership and decision making, which is really important so that people know who to speak to and what's happening with land in their area. Diversity and collaboration in models of ownership, tenure and governance, and that includes opportunities for community ownership. The statement sets out that it's really important that there's an opportunity for land to contribute to community wealth and well-being, and that is through good stewardship and of course community ownership. There was a new principle added to the statement as well in 2022 when it was reviewed, and that sets out that there should be balanced decision making in relation to land, and that is taking into account economic, environmental, social and cultural factors in decision making. And you can see our call templates and guidance for more information and a bit more detail on that. Next slide, please, Karen. And so in terms of how we take forward this work, the Commission, Karen and I both work in our good practice team, and we have a good practice programme which is guided by the Land Rights and Responsibility Statement and its principles. And we take forward a programme of work of protocols, guidance, advice, self-assessments and training and development, which we co-produce in partnership with our Good Practice Advisory Group. The advisory group is a really key part of the work that we do, and we have representatives from across different parts of the land sector. So we have Community Land Scotland, the Development Trust Association for Scotland, the National Farmers Union, Scottish Land and Estates, Scottish Property Federation, and Scottish Environment Link involved in the group. And it's really important for us to draw on that experience to make sure that the expectations and the guidance that we set out are really relevant for the people who use them and are really practical things that people can implement. And we also engage with and involve other organisations where they've got particular experience on topics that we're covering. So we really do work across lots of different sectors and all types of ownership. And our key role with the Good Practice programme is about encouraging and enabling that good practice. Next slide. Thanks. So one of the elements that we have in our work is that we ask people where they're facing situations that they don't believe align with the land rights and responsibility statement expectations and the expectations that are set out in our good practice protocols, that they can get in touch with us, and we will do our best to help people find a positive way forward. So we have around 90 cases a year from right across Scotland, and they cover a really wide range of issues. But some of the common issues arising since we launched the Good Practice programme and since we started recording our casework is challenges with community engagement. It is still far and away the topic that we get asked about the most. We also get quite a bit of contact about transparency of ownership and decision making, and that's where people just kind of aren't sure where to find information or who to speak to, or what they can expect in terms of information being shared. And increasingly, we're seeing a changing approach to community benefits, and some of that ties in with work in the natural capital sector, but also other aspects of land use where benefits can be considered. Next slide, please, Karen. And so, as I've said, we help landowners of all types and local communities, land agents, land managers, to understand and align with the land rights and responsibility statement. So we will work with anyone from single estate right through to large public landowners and large-scale private landowners. And we'll help them to own, use and manage land in ways that align with principles. So we do this through advising on strategies and policies, helping people to evaluate the way that they own and manage land. So we have a framework and templates and can work one-on-one with people to really identify what's going well, any good practice that can be shared with other landowners, like the examples that we'll hear today. And then areas for improvement as well, which is obviously a part of normal business to kind of think about areas for change and what you might do better in future. We have a lot of resources on our website, loads of templates, checklists, flowcharts and guidance, and we're just aiming to try and make putting this into practice easier, make sure that people have the right kind of resources to do that. We have a lot of case studies on our website, and they're really about championing good practice. So we've got a great range across lots of different topics, lots of different types of landowners from right across Scotland that show you what other people are doing and what's possible. Casework, which I've just touched on, which is really about helping people to understand or resolve issues by working together. And we carry out events, training and webinars like this one. We have a leadership and good practice programme. We can do tailored CPD sessions with lots of different people. And we work in partnership with other organisations just to make sure that we're reaching the right people and working in a way that is helpful for those in the sector. So that's my introduction to the Commission and the work that we do. And I'm going to pass you on to Karen, who's going to talk a bit more about building a culture of good practice in land rights and responsibilities.
Thanks, Gemma. Yeah, so I mean, you'll all be very aware of the Land Reform Bill currently progressing through Parliament, and I would like to sort of draw your attention as well to, we've got a recorded webinar on our YouTube channel that was the first CPD webinar session that we did, which was on land reform policy and also land market insights. So you might want to check that out. But it's been a time of changes in law and policy and practice, and the landscape's been shifting quite dramatically over the last decade or so, with community ownership and rights to buy now well established. The Land Rights and Responsibilities Statement informing practice in both the public and private sector and becoming more mainstreamed and adopted as a norm by lots of different major players in all sectors. And there's been a significant shift in relation to community engagement. It's much more part of landowners and land managers' thinking now as they make their plans. And the wider context is constantly changing, and that is bringing change in land ownership, management and use, sometimes at a very significant scale. And whatever's happening with the bill, the work that the Commission does around good practice, it will remain very much focused on the voluntary approach, because that's where a lot of the important work happens. The Land Rights and Responsibilities Statement applies to everybody, rural or urban, public sector, private sector. It has benefits in helping manage reputational risk by minimising negative impacts, because it's about building good relationships of trust and cooperation between the different people involved or related to land. And through that environment, opportunities can arise, and Emma's going to talk about that in a few minutes, an example from Buccleuch. So we've worked closely with public and private landowners to help embed that in decision making, and that approach is particularly important when significant change is happening, land use and land ownership changing at a large scale. And we're going to have a session on the 11th of June on managing significant change. So I would really invite you all to consider joining us for that as well. One of the things that we talk about being central to really central to all the principles of the Land Rights and Responsibilities Statement is transparency, which is core for trust and good community engagement. So that's about having information publicly available around who owns land or is responsible for it, including local contacts, people with local decision-making authority, and informing and engaging people in a timely way about upcoming changes or decisions that might impact them directly. One of the things we quite often say to folk is let people know about things that you would want to know about if it was impacting on your doorstep. And part of that can sometimes be a land management summary as well, that many rural businesses now include on their website, so it's publicly available. So that baseline of building trust is key, and it means that any engagement around changes as they happen is easier because those relationships are there. And it also creates an atmosphere where opportunities to include people in decision making that where it might be mutually beneficial can be taken up. It means that also that landowners and managers are, well, the terminology and the guidance is to be responsive to reasonable approaches from the community. So that means considering requests and answering queries in a good, timely fashion. Again, all of that helps to minimise reputational risk or misunderstandings. It helps avoid the rumour mill getting going. If something's in the pipeline, it's best to talk to people at an early stage about it. So I'm just in the next couple of slides, I'm just going to sort of go through the key points in the Scottish Government's guidance on community engagement around decisions relating to land. And it's split into, the way that it's framed is that the response should be reasonable and appropriate to the level of impact. So where impact is moderate, it is expected to be moderate. And the example that we often use for that is around something like timber transport, something that would be a short-term disruptive activity. Informal engagement is recommended, and regular communication just to help smooth over misunderstandings or prevent problems. But when change is significant, a change is planned that's going to have a significant impact, a formal engagement process is recommended. And yes, so our session on the 11th of June will go into that process in more detail. And the government's definition of what might lead to significant impact is quite, it's quite, it does define the scale of that quite clearly. So it's about long-term or permanent land use changes, long-term disruptive activities, and activities with a significant impact on the social, economic, or cultural development of a community. And things like access to a quality environment or community viability. So yeah, you can see they're quite serious. The definition is quite a strong definition for significant impact there. But of course, with all of these changes that we've already spoken about, that does happen, especially in areas where there's maybe lots of projects of land use change at a large scale, and the cumulative effect of those different things can be quite significant on communities. So that's something to bear in mind. So I think Scarlett will post in the chat that the link to the form that I mentioned, where if you're interested in the other CPD webinars that we're running. As I said, we've got the one on managing significant change, but we've also got the tenant farming session, which will be a chance to meet the new tenant farming commissioner, land commission, and get a bit of a policy update there as well. We also, in the next couple of weeks, we have a session on landowner-led housing, which I think many of you will have experience to share on that. And later in the year, we also intend to have sessions on disposals policy and creating opportunities for collaboration between landowners and communities. So without any further ado, I'll hand over to Emma, and do post any of your questions in the chat. I'll monitor that, and we'll take those questions and have a bit of a discussion towards the end of the session. Okay, Emma.
Thank you so much. It's really great to be here and just give a little bit more information about Buccleuch's approach to community engagement and how that can create opportunities both for Buccleuch and the communities of which we're part. If I can just go to the first slide, Karen, that'd be great. To start with, I just wanted to give a bit of background to Buccleuch because I'm not sure how much is known about us within the audience. So it's just to give a bit of context as well. We're a diverse and modern rural estate, and we also have a successful commercial property business within that. There's 3 estates in Scotland: Dalkeith Country Park, Queensbury Estate, and Borders Estate. So Dalkeith is just outside Edinburgh, Queensbury is Dumfries and Galloway, and Borders Estate is kind of Scottish borders and then into Dumfries and Galloway as well. We also have one estate in England, Boughton Estate in Northamptonshire, and we have mineral rights at Furness. As a business, we do all the things that you'd expect from a rural estate. We've got forestry, farming, rural property management, and sporting, but we've also diversified in quite a big way into renewable energy. Holiday accommodation is quite a big thing for us as well, and we've got quite a vibrant visitor service offering. Overall, for land management, we take a very holistic approach. We have to make sure that we find the right balance between the community's aspirations, continue to be a financially sustainable business, and have as positive an impact on our surrounding environment as possible. Next slide, please, Karen, sorry. Community is one of Buccleuch's guiding principles, and we're very much in and of the communities of which we're part. And day-to-day community engagement happens on so many different levels. We've got skill sharing with our rural colleagues, The estate directors have an open door policy and attend community meetings, so people know who they are, where to find them, all their contact details are on our website as well. And we take transparency very seriously. We've got our land management statement on our website, which we developed in line with SLC guidance. We've actually worked very closely with them when drawing this up, and most of our land is registered with Registers of Scotland, and there's an interactive map on the website for that as well. And as a business, we do take the time to continually review the assets that we have, both land and built assets, just to ensure that they contribute to the sustainability of the business, so that we can remain a very strong local employer and maintain that commitment to the heritage assets, such as the castle down at Drumlanrig and the house at Bowhill. So following that review, our Scottish estates have actually reduced in land area by 31% in the last 15 years, which is quite considerable when you look at it on the map. Some of our larger community engagement successes are pictured here on the slide. So on the top left, there's Hermitage Village Hall, where they approached us about the land adjacent to the hall, about looking to have that for an extension, which we gifted to them. Next to that, you can see the Castle Home in Langham, which is a really important site for the local community. It's where the common riding happened, the flapping, cricket, all that sort of thing. And this was gifted to a newly formed group, the Castle Home Community Trust, who approached the estate and started discussions about taking that forward, and it now remains in perpetuity for the community. And then at the bottom, you can see Kirkup Steading. And this was a site that Buccleuch had taken forward for planning permission for dwelling houses, but we were actually approached by a local community group who talked to us of their ambitions. They bought the land from us, and it's now being developed out into affordable dwellings and workshops, which has been great for the local area because it's brought families into the area and some employment. Next slide, please. Just to give a more specific example, one of the largest community engagements that we've taken part in at Buccleuch involved the Langham Moor, which was part of Borders Estate. So following our asset review, the decision was taken to sell the 25,000 acres that makes up the Langham Moor. This decision was taken because it was no longer contributing to the financial sustainability of the business. It helped us reduce that overall footprint, and we acknowledged that there was perhaps other groups out there who could do something different with the land that perhaps we couldn't as Buccleuch. And thinking about the community and thinking that this was quite a significant piece of land in the local area, any change here was going to have a really significant impact on them. So we wanted to understand the thoughts of the local community. Following the Scottish Land Commission's protocol and engaging with communities, we went out with the consultation document that you can see on screen here, just to find out what the views of those affected would be. By doing so, the Langham Initiative and Newcastle and District Community Trust came to Buccleuch with specific interest in different areas of the moor, and we started the discussions with them just to understand what their aspirations were. The dialogue remained open, so this started in around 2019 with final sales concluding in 2020, so it wasn't a kind of overnight process. There was times when we had to come back to the table, there were delays, talking about funding, timing, exactly what the boundaries for the land that they owned would be. And we concluded in August 2022, and Newcastle and District Community Trust now have the 750 acres, and the Langham Initiative overall have around 10,000 acres, which is now the Taras Valley Nature Reserve. The remainder of it was sold to Oxygen Conservation, who are doing really well in there. So with this, something that Buccleuch, it wasn't working for us to keep the business sustainable, but it's opened up such an opportunity for the local communities to take that forward. And it's great looking at their successes on there. And I think just if we can look now at the next slide about handling opportunities and challenges. I think with community engagement, it's brilliant to do and it's really positive. But as with all estate matters, there are real bumps along the road sometimes. And I love this picture of my colleagues who are in the process of building a dry stay dyke. And I think that can be quite a good analogy for community engagement. You can see that they're here, they're having to work together to find what fits in terms of the right stain for the right bit of the wall. And I think businesses like Buccleuch and the communities really need to work together to find out what's going to work for them, but fits with the community ambitions, but also helps with the financial sustainability and the long-term future of the estate. There will be a few missteps along the way. You'll pick up a stain, it's not going to fit. But by keeping that dialogue open and continuing with the process, you will get there in the end. And in the long term, you're going to have something really wonderful that's fit for purpose for everybody and does what it needs to do. And thinking about our experiences here at Buccleuch community engagement, and I'm talking now about the larger scale things, a lot of the challenges have come from out with our control and out with the community's control. There's been things such as timing, so perhaps the timing of Scottish Land Fund funding doesn't quite fit with the timeline that you've set out at the beginning for a process. You might be waiting for community groups to be established, as we had to do with down at Langham for the Castle Home. But you get there on those. The biggest one that we have found was also where the communities don't speak with one voice. There's dissenting voices within one community, and that happened in a particular occasion that people might be aware of at Walnock Head on Queensberry Estate, where Buccleuch and the Walnock Head Community Trust entered into discussions in good faith about an area of land that they wanted to take into their ownership. The process, I think we were in discussions for about 4 or 5 years, perhaps longer. But over that time, the community became increasingly divided, and it became quite toxic up there, and Buccleuch were very much stuck in the middle. In the end, the decision came down to the Scottish Land Fund, where the funding wasn't awarded, but it was hard for Buccleuch in the interim because there was no obvious arbitrator when that situation arose, and we kind of watched a small community implode. If you've ever been to Walnock Head, if you blink, you're driving through, you blink and you miss it at times. So it's a really small community to come to that stage. However, that notwithstanding, there's such good opportunities for communities and businesses like Buccleuch that can be gained through community engagement. I spoke about the skills sharing, the open door policy. But in many instances, the communities get to own the land that they need to achieve their ambitions. It's important to remember, though, that ownership is not always the right fit. It's coming back to that stain analogy. Sometimes the right fit is a lease of the land or just having access. You build up really good links with your local communities and the community groups, and you get a much better understanding of one another's objectives as you keep that dialogue open. It helps estates build a positive reputation, not just in the local communities, but wider. And I think just all round good vibes, if that's not too cheesy. For us, the keys to success are very much reflecting what Karen mentioned earlier. Have an open dialogue with the community and any advisors that they might have. Take the time to mutually understand one another's aims and ambitions, and that flexibility, coming back to, there might be those bumps along the road or times when you have to come back round the table, and just manage each other's expectations and have a clear path of where you want to be. You might not always follow that path, but you know where your destination is ultimately. And finally, just looking at the outcomes and learnings. I've covered a couple off there. So just on to the next slide. Buccleuch, we continue to work with the communities on the various levels that I mentioned, resources, community meetings, etc. And the key to good community engagement is to keep this going. It's a continual dialogue. It's not just going to the community when there's a big thing. It's just keeping that door open, keeping the dialogue going. We've completed some big things. We've completed some small things, but it's always been on the basis of following the good practice guidelines that have been set out by SLC and following the various protocols and things like that. Always have meaningful engagement and understand what the community ambitions are and what solution is going to fit those ambitions and align with your sustainable goals. 4 key takeaways for me: always listen to the community, engage on the big things as soon as possible, and if you keep that dialogue open, shouldn't come as such a big surprise to the communities with which you're involved. Remain flexible and always be true to your guiding principles, whether they be that of your business and of your own. And I don't think you can go far wrong on community engagement if you do that. Thank you.